To help answer that question, we bring in Louisiana's Republican Congressman and the House Minority Whip, Steve Scalise. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Sean, great to be back with you.
Hey, Congressman, before we get going, you lost a colleague this weekend, John Lewis from Georgia, massive civil rights leader. Tell us what that loss means for Congress.
What a giant he was. And I knew when I was serving with him that he was one of those people that, when you leave this job, you're going to tell your kids and grandkids, I got to serve with John Lewis. And luckily, I got to spend a lot of time with him. He invited me to Selma, Alabama. He did that for a lot of members to go and walk with him across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and talk about reliving history, an ugly part of our history, but something that John Lewis gave his blood for to make this a more perfect union. And his legacy is secured as one of the great civil rights leaders of our time, who had a tremendous impact on improving racial equality in the lives for all Americans.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be felt in the Senate, in the House, and in the entire Congress. So my sympathies to you and the House of Representative colleagues. Let me switch gears for a second. You're back in Washington, D.C. I know you guys are dealing with COVID-19 response, and that includes getting kids back to school. It's been 6 months since kids around the country were sent home. I'm going to just ask this. Why is this so tough to figure out how to send them back to school safely?
Sean, it's really not tough. It's a matter of first committing yourself to saying we're going to make sure that we safely get kids back to school. And I was at a meeting, a roundtable just a few days ago in Baton Rouge with Vice President Pence. He brought his whole team down. And we had this on LSU's campus where LSU and the Southern University system are working on protocols to start school in a few weeks with kids in the classrooms. And you can do it safely. Dr. Burks was there, by the way. And she confirms, there's protocols you can put in place for kids, whether it's K through 12 or higher education. The focus has to be not on whether or not you can do it, but we know it can be done safely. Now let's go work through and get it done. No more excuses. Our kids need this, by the way. The American Academy of Pediatrics, Sean, just put out a study that, number one, shows guidelines for how to open up schools safely, but then they go further and they talk about the negative impacts on kids who were not in school those last few months of the last school year, and why it's so important that we have kids back in school, not just learning remotely, but to be able to be back in school. We've got to get this done.
Yeah, I know. I think every parent right now wants to send their kids back to school safely, but there are real risks, right? We acknowledge that. And the question I have is, God forbid, the first student that dies from COVID, I think is going to change the game. Don't you think if that happens, God forbid, we hope it doesn't, that suddenly that's going to then recalibrate everything, because that once that one thing happens, it's going to reverberate throughout the country?
Well, first of all, Sean, we know a lot more about COVID-19 than we did back when the first shut-ins happened and schools were closed. We know, number one, that a senior citizen in a nursing home is the most vulnerable person. Over 40% of all COVID deaths in America came from less than 1% of the population. That's seniors in nursing homes. And there were a few governors who actually violated CDC protocols and CMS protocols that led to a lot of those deaths. But the other side of that is, we know if you have diabetes, other underlying conditions, you're more at risk. But young kids were not the ones that were dying from COVID, even if they're getting COVID. And they got it, by the way, even when schools were shut down. So it's not like you can avoid COVID anywhere in your life. It's out there. We need to learn how to safely get back to doing the things that we did before in a better way. And opening schools is critical because over 50 million kids in America go to schools, and they need that in-person learning experience for so many of them. And we can't deny that for them. We have to provide that opportunity. If a parent feels it's unsafe, they have that choice. But for everybody else, they ought to be back in school and getting that in-person learning experience that's so vital, not only for their educational well-being, but for their mental well-being. And American Academy of Pediatrics lays this out very clearly in their guidelines they just put out.
That being said, would it be helpful, considering we're weeks away, for the CDC to put out guidance for schools on how to reopen safely?
I think that's something you might see. Again, Dr. Burks was at the roundtable I was at over on LSU's campus, where they talked about how to safely reopen, and she gets it totally. She agrees. And look, if they want to mandate masks, that's something that you're seeing a lot of businesses do. When I flew here on a plane, they mandate masks. You wear the mask. If kids need to wear masks, and teachers do, that's a protocol they can look at. But there are a lot of other things too, just wiping down and making sure people are washing hands and watching the interaction, the proximity. But a lot of teachers have told me, or people that are focused on how to reopen. They say it's a lot more controlled setting in a school than if those kids aren't at school. They might be out playing with their other friends. It's not like people are just hiding out like Joe Biden in a basement. I mean, they're getting around and being around other people. And,
Hey, do you think
when
that
they're in close proximity, that's a problem.
right? How hard is it going to be to pass the next stimulus bill? Democrats control the House, Republicans control the Senate, and obviously the president's a Republican. So what's the plan to get the next stimulus package through for individuals and businesses?
Well, you still see a lot of negotiations going on about if there is going to be a next bill, and the president's laid out things like he wants a payroll tax cut, and that's something that would help everybody, both people that are working and people that are not working, because it would encourage employers and help employers bring more people back. But we also look and we see the $600 a week that's being paid has become an impediment for workers getting a lot of employees getting their workers back. So we've got to look at all the money that's already been spent. Over $2 trillion is out there. Some of that money still hasn't been spent. Over $100 billion in the Paycheck Protection Program alone, that's still out there. I focus more on what we've already done and making it work better for people, as opposed to all this talk of more and more money being spent. Let's focus on helping businesses get back, reopen safely, helping people get back about their lives safely. And there's a lot of money we've spent to do that.
So if you say that $600 is an impediment to some degree because it's incentivizing people not to work, what's the answer?
Well, again, I think you've looked at a number of businesses that have shown clearly that they're having a hard time getting their work back, that are reopening and that want to reopen. Some of them can't reopen because they can't get their work back. That was not something you want to see Congress helping kind of spur and promote. But at the same time, we know that there are millions of people still unemployed because their businesses haven't reopened. That's why the focus needs to be on getting things safely reopened and opening schools again. Look, having schools open is not just important to those 50+ million children that are relying on us to go and do that hard work to figure out how to get it done, but also a lot of those parents that can't go to their job because they're homeschooling their kid. I mean, this is a real impediment to reopening the economy as well.
Congressman, thank you again for joining us to give us an update. Best of luck as you try to move forward with the next coronavirus.